Welcome, everybody, to my Cup to Cup special called This is the Hill That I Die On. I call it that because I am taking the optimistic approach to FSU football. So I'm going to try and give you something each week that you can be optimistic about for FSU football. I know that's hard to do because right now there's just not a lot to be optimistic about as FSU fans, but I'm going to give you something every single week. And this week, I think I have something good. I really do. With that said, let's go ahead and get started. What if I were to tell you that FSU started the season playing a Southern Miss team? Sorry, let me start over. I'm going to give you a little history lesson this week, in addition to giving you something to be optimistic about. Okay? And this happened 30 years ago. So if you have not heard of this team, that's okay, because I was barely alive. I don't remember this team outside of hearing about it after the fact and reading about it after the fact. But anyways, what if I were to tell you that FSU would start the season in Jacksonville against a Southern Miss team that would go on to finish the season 5-6, and they would lose that game in Jacksonville, basically a home game, 30-26. Now, granted, that Southern Miss team was led by a quarterback by the name of Brett Favre, I believe it's pronounced.
What the hell is Brett Favre doing here?
A very average quarterback who probably would never go on to do anything in the pros. But they were a 5-6 team in a bad conference. This was not a good team. And FSU lost in Jacksonville 30-26. Then the very next week, at home, they lost to number 10 Clemson 34-23. I'm not saying that this team is that team, because they're not. This Florida State team that I'm talking about, which, in case you haven't guessed it yet, was the 1989 FSU team. This Florida State team was ranked preseason number 6, so they had high expectations. Everyone knew they had talent. Unlike this team, not that this team doesn't have talent, but the expectations were definitely not as high. But still, I mean, they started 0-2, and one of those losses was an unexplainable giant upset. There's no other way to say it. That was just an enormous upset.
What about Brett Favre?
So, I mean, there are some correlations here. FSU is supposed to play in Jacksonville against Boise State, ends up playing it at home, kind of thrown together last minute because of the hurricane. And we lose a game that we were favored in. Not as heavily and definitely not the same, but you can see the similarities. Then the next week, obviously, we barely pulled out a squeaker against UL Monroe. So that's not really comparable. But then we go on the road against a very good Virginia team, and we lose a close game. So there are some correlations here. The difference is that 1989 team then went on to win 10 straight games. And let me just, because I just have to. I have to, in case you haven't heard this, because there's lots of FSU fans that don't know about this 1989 team, and you should. This is an incredible team to start 0-2 and then finish the season, in my opinion. And again, I was barely alive, so take this with a grain of salt. But in mine and a lot of other people's opinions, they finished that year as what was probably the best team in the nation.
I mean, Florida State is maybe the best team I've seen this year.
By the end of the year, they could have beaten any team in the nation. And if you wipe off those two games, I think FSU I think if the playoff existed now, that FSU team should have gone to the playoffs and would have won the national championship.
Playoffs? Don't talk about it. Playoffs? You kidding me? Playoffs?
Anyways, let me just tell you how we finished that season. Week 3, after starting 0-2, we go on the road to Baton Rouge to face LSU at Death Valley. Starting 0-2, win 31-21. 2 weeks later, we go into the Carrier Dome against Syracuse, number 17 at the time. and we beat them 41-10. We beat the pants off them. Next week, we go into Blacksburg, and Virginia Tech is not the same team back then that they are now, but we beat them 41-17. Week after that, home against number 11 Auburn, 22-14. Week after that, home against number 2 Miami, and beat them by 2 touchdowns, 24-10. Week after that, South Carolina at home, 35-10. 2 weeks later, Florida in Gainesville, 24-17. And we finished the season in the Fiesta Bowl against number 6 Nebraska, and we beat the shit out of them, 41-17. I'm not saying that this current 2019 FSU team is that 1989 team, because they're not. That's unrealistic. First of all, we can go ahead and pencil in a third loss right now against Clemson, because we're not going to beat Clemson. As optimistic as I am, and I do consider myself an optimistic fan, there's 0% chance that we are going to beat Clemson this year. It's just not going to happen. Barring, I shouldn't say 0, barring their entire team quitting and us getting a forfeit win, we're not winning that game. But the rest of the schedule is very winnable. Okay, it just is. This is not that difficult of a schedule. It's difficult because we're just not playing as a team right now, specifically the defense. But this is not that difficult of a schedule. And I bring up that 1989 team because they didn't let starting poorly ruin their season. And that's what I hope that this team will realize. Just because you start 0-2, yes, you're not going to make a national championship game. Did any of us actually think that was on the table this year? If you did, you make me look like a pessimist, because I never thought that, ever. And as much as the players may have said it, I don't think any of the players thought it either. That's just not realistic. They knew they were not in that upper echelon of teams. They just weren't. But they can still have a successful season. You can. We can have a bad start to the season. But wouldn't you rather have a bad start and a great finish than a great start and a bad finish? Do you really want to be like those Miami teams of the last 10 years, where every year it seems like they start 5-0 and they finish the season 7-5? Is that what we want to be? Or do we want to be the team that starts 0-2 and wins 10 straight games? And then that leads into a dynasty, because that's what FSU football became. It became a dynasty. And that 1989 team was a big part of that dynasty. Without that 1989 team, that dynasty does not happen. I don't think we win 2 national championships. They could have been that team that started 0-2 and threw in the towel, and FSU football was dead before it actually existed. It had a good, 7-year run? 8-year run? Yeah, we could have been that team. That had a solid 8-year run, but never really was a national championship contender. That's what we could have been. But instead, that 1989 team got their shit together. They won 10 straight games, and they helped lead the way to that FSU dynasty. Can this team be that team? Can it? You can sit here and tell me no. And it's not going to be that 1989 team, no. But what it can have in common with that 1989 team is it can be the catalyst to another FSU dynasty. We have the name. We have the players. We have the stadium. We sure as shit have the fans. We're out there, man. FSU, say what you will, man. I see Paul Feinbaum say all the time FSU fans suck. FSU fans are amazing. We have our faults. All fan bases have their faults. But FSU fans, when it comes down to it, care so much about that team. We just do. We care about Florida State football. Let me toss another thing at you. That 1989 team. Let me read a couple players that were on that team. Odell Higgins. Does that name sound familiar? And he also happens to be a part of this team. Coincidence? Definitely. Yeah, it's definitely coincidence. But, who knows? Terrell Buckley was a freshman on that team, who is also the guy that I wanted to coach our defensive backs this year. We didn't have the coaching spot open, unfortunately. We just didn't have enough coaching spots once we hired Ron Dugans and Randy Clements, which were both great hires. So I'm not going to sit here and complain about those hires, because I love both of those hires. I still really, really, really hope that next year when we have an additional coaching spot open up, because we do have an additional coaching spot opening up next year without even having to get rid of anyone. We'll have an additional coaching spot next year. I really, really hope we find some way to get Terrell Buckley on our coaching staff, because he is a freaking amazing coach, was an amazing player. It's just an insanely... If you have not heard any interviews with Terrell Buckley talking about coaching defense, you're missing out, man. Go listen. I know that I believe it's Wake Up War Chant has had some. I think Jeff Cameron's had one. Listen to a Terrell Buckley interview. Anywhere. YouTube. Find one. That dude knows how to coach defensive backs. And we have defensive back talent, but we're not coaching them right. I loved the Harlan Barnett hire at the time. I'm not ready to throw in the flag yet. I'm getting there. But if he could bring in Terrell Buckley and just say, hey, Terrell, defensive backs are yours, this defense would instantly improve, because I've never heard anybody, the kind of stuff that he sees as a coach blows my mind. So yeah, 2 great players, one who's already on FSU's coaching staff, one, I don't know how he feels about leaving Mississippi State and coming to FSU, but if we could get him, that's another one. I think that this team is, in the end, I shouldn't say I think, I hope that this team in the end can one day be compared to that 89 team in the fact that it helped ignite a dynasty, and the hope that it started poorly and finished strongly. So I hope that. I hope it, and I feel it. I do. Not to the extent of 1989. I have to keep prefacing that. Also, you may have noticed I'm wearing my FSU alumni shirt. It's my favorite shirt in the entire world. Anyone that knows me knows that I wear this shirt way more often than anyone should ever wear a single shirt. Most of the time when I do a cup-to-cup video, I wear my cup-to-cup shirt. I made the exception for my FSU alumni shirt because this is when FSU turns it around. This is the day. I shouldn't say this is the day. This Saturday is the day. Okay? This Saturday is the day. Because we're going and we're beating Louisville. The Louisville. Yes, we're beating the Louisville. And we are reigniting the FSU Dynasty. And it all starts this Saturday. We're going to look back and we're going to say, what is that? 9/19, 9/20, 9/21. September 21st, 2019. That's the day that we turned it around. That's it. And you know what? This is the hill that I die on. Right here. Cut to cup, FSU, let's go. Insert FSU music now. You hear that? Let's go, baby. Let's go, Knowles. This is it. This is the time. Hop on now, because soon it's going to start filling up. It's real empty now. Hop on that bandwagon now, because it's going to start filling up after this Saturday, baby. Let's go. Love you guys. Keep listening. Keep it up, man. Y'all are the best.